Welcome to From Our Generation, where we uncover the ideas and events that shape the world we live in today. I'm Crom Carmichael.
And I'm Mike Hassel.
Together we'll explore the past to better understand the present, because history isn't just about what happened, it's about how you think about it. Well, Mike, it is January 23rd, 2026.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. That's
Yes.
right. Okay. One of my favorite songs, by the way. It was an oldie but goodie.
All right.
1, 2, 3. Yeah.
We're not going to play
All
it.
right. So, Mike, what we're going to be talking about today, I was thinking about this as I was watching the events of the last week, especially as they relate to Davos, Greenland, Venezuela, mostly about foreign policy. And I was watching President Trump in Davos. I was watching the reaction of the various heads of state that were also in attendance. Business leaders are just there. Some of them may or may not speak, but that's not what was relevant to me. And then I watched Gavin Newsom because he's also a politician who was there, who chose to go there all on his own.
He was uninvited.
He was uninvited and not part of the American delegation.
Yes.
As I watched all this unfold, the three groups of leaders, or the three. Well, I'm going to identify Trump as a leader in one sense, and then I'm going to identify the head of NATO as a leader who is not leader of the United States, nor is he the head of state of any country in Europe. And so then the European heads of states. And so then I asked myself, I said, we talk about leadership. And I want to focus primarily, in fact, I want to focus on political leadership as apart from business leadership. And what is it that we want? What are the attributes? If we say somebody is a wonderful political leader, what do we think those attributes? What are the attributes of a great political leader? So I'm interested in kind of I have some thoughts on what political leadership includes. So I want to get what you thought.
The first thing that occurs to me is from a business context, the difference between a manager and a leader. A manager is somebody that organizes and optimizes what is.
Okay.
And a leader is somebody who changes what is. They break the framework, they color outside the box, they move something toward a new way of doing things.
Okay.
Now, in political leadership, obviously a leader is somebody who's elected. Simply by being elected, you are a leader. So then what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to represent the people that elected you and what they want and what they're telling you? We've talked a lot about democracy being sovereign for the people. The people choose their leaders. And so the leaders are accountable to their people in a very profound way. It is a anti-tyranny way of governing, right, to keep people from monarchs, et cetera, from tyrannizing. So I think what we're getting at is a lot of times people may not know what's best for the country, or they may not agree with political leadership. And I think you clearly have a couple of different stripes. People think that the better future is to have a bigger government, more regulation, more control, more attention to things like climate, et cetera. And then you have a polarized other end of the spectrum that thinks we're better off with more limited government, more private sector vigor.
And when you say we are better off.
Yes, the country as a whole. And
now, what does that mean?
It's a great question.
Okay.
Because
that's why I'm here.
Thank you for being here today. That's right. I mean, either one may not favor some people.
Some people.
Whichever you choose, there are going to be some losers.
Right. But so let me give a definition of what the goal, and this is my definition,
right,
of what political leadership ought to be trying to achieve, and that is a society that has a high degree of safety, and then has policies that result in the greatest amount of prosperity for as many people as possible.
Yes.
Which means it won't be everybody.
Right.
But it'll be as many as possible.
We can add the caveat that innovation is not safe, There's a lot of risks that are taken. So absolute safety is not the goal.
Well, I was actually,
I know.
you're talking about economic safety, and that's a great point.
Yeah.
I was talking about physical safety.
I agree with your point. You want physical safety, but not absolute physical safety.
Exactly.
What you have to do to earn it
Yeah.
would kill innovation and it would not permit any
That's
risk.
fair enough. Yeah, very good. Yeah. So at any rate, so then the other question is, and you said something that I think is really interesting, and that is,
That's why I'm here.
Yes, that's right. Touche.
Yeah.
But what you said is that political leaders, do they represent what their constituencies want? So the way that I hear that is that once elected, should they be constantly in touch with their constituencies and then do what the constituents want, or should they run on a set of things that they intend to do and then do everything possible to keep their promises? Because I think it's the latter. I don't think that politicians should be sticking their finger in the air to see what the public wants today.
Yeah, I've heard this talked about with surgeons. You know how arrogant they are, and a lot of them are very arrogant. And my response to that is, somebody cuts my heart out and is about to put another one in, I don't want him holding it up and saying, which way am I going to go with this? I'd like a little arrogance and expertise.
Yes.
So that's intended as a sort of a joke. But the point is, I think you're speaking of presidential leadership.
Well, and also representative leadership. If a mayor is running for the mayorship of New York, and in New York, Manadani's made very specific promises. I think they cannot possibly be kept any more than if somebody runs for mayor and says, if you elect me mayor, I will, on day one, make everybody a multimillionaire.
Well, 2 points that I would make. One is that a House of Representative is literally a representative. They're expected to represent their people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in the design of the U.S. government, you had that function allocated to the House. Senators are supposed to have a more long-term view. They have longer terms, 6 years rather than 2. They don't turn over as much. And they were elected by the state legislatures in the beginning, so they were more noblemen, more people of property. And so they were intended to have a bigger perspective. And then the president executes. And at the beginning, there wasn't a whole lot to execute because the government was very big. Now we have a huge government, and we elect one guy. And here comes to my second point, which I think they often satisfy their base.
Yes.
They identify their base, what they want. They get supported by them, and they try to expand their base. But when they get in office, they're going to enact policies that are to the preferences of their base.
To the benefit
and preferences of their base.
Well, and
That's why
if
they got
it's-
elected.
if
They do what they say, which I think you were getting at, it's something we might admire.
Well, but if it's their base, then if you're helping 50% of the people and harming 50% of the people, that does not fall under my definition of trying to create the greatest amount of prosperity for the largest number of people possible.
Yeah.
Because in a prosperous society, you should have no more than 10 to 15% who are truly struggling and who need additional help, which I believe should be done at the state or local level because it's going to be more effective and less expensive. Mm-hmm. But this is really interesting because when you're running, if a person's running for president, and there was, by the way, I would advocate people to go look this up because it was one of the most interesting speeches. Al Smith, who was governor of New York and ran for president, and he was ran against FDR, and he was a very, very strong Democrat. Very when I say partisan, I just meant that mean on the policies, but he was a very strong Democrat.
Yes.
And when in 1936, he gave a speech. And I don't know who he gave the speech to, but he was chastising FDR for breaking virtually all of the promises that FDR made when FDR ran and won in 1932.
Right.
And it was fascinating to see Al Smith lay out what FDR promised and then say, and here's, after he made this promise, here's what he did. And one of the promises was FDR said the federal government is 25% too large. Mm-hmm. when he ran. He said, and I'm going to shrink the size of government. And he got in and exploded the size of government. And so, especially for president, can a country last long if candidates for president run on policies that they believe will get them elected, and then do the opposite in many things from what they promised?
Well, I think it certainly increases the degree of corruption and disorder and chaos when people do that, when they say one thing and do another.
And hardcore partisanship, because the people who benefit from the change in policy love the change.
Sure.
And they will then support that change going forward.
Well, I think you see some of that with Trump. There's a lot of people that were traditional Democratic voters that have switched because they perceive now that what he's doing is in their interest, lowering crime in their neighborhoods, looking to give them more opportunity that's not government-sponsored, it's private sector. And so you see some switching, and I think that happens all the time.
Yes, well, it does, but I'm trying to get at Trump. The people you and I were talking before we started the program. If you take the body politic as 100%, you and I think we agreed that there's maybe 30% of that 100% who despise Trump.
Yes,
and then there's another 20% who don't like him, but don't despise him, oppose him, but don't despise him. And then there's 20% who like what he does, but not what he says. And then there's 30% who love him.
Whatever he does
or whatever he says. In fact, when he says something, they laugh. They always think it's funny. And because it offends somebody that they apparently, I guess, get pleasure in seeing offended. And quite frankly, there are a few people that I enjoy seeing be offended. And so I would count myself somewhere in that 30%, the lower end of that 30%. There's some things that Trump says that I kind of roll my eyes and wish he hadn't said.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change my opinion of what he does, because I truly am amazed. I never would have thought that Greenland mattered, but that's because the last time Greenland mattered was Harry Truman. What I've learned from this whole thing, when I get back and look at the history of U.S. policy toward Greenland, it's not what I thought it was, because I was just ignorant. We have wanted Greenland for a very long time. Seward wanted Greenland when he bought Alaska. He also wanted Greenland.
So he was the Secretary of State in Lincoln's administration, so 1860s.
Yeah. So the control of Greenland, not the control of the people, but the geography, Greenland represents a very important potential flashpoint. And I've never thought of that. I mean, hell, I keep thinking, well, it's that great big island kind of north in the North Atlantic where almost nobody lives, and
all covered with snow,
and all covered with snow.
Like
and
I didn't said about Alaska,
right? And exactly. And I didn't think much more about it. And that now that Trump has made it such an issue, and the arguments that he's making, when I'm now going to Davos, and Trump has made very clear that he is not going to allow the status quo to remain.
He's not going to relent.
Yes.
And the subtext here is he's going to build a golden dome. Okay, if you look back to the war between Iran,
and we're not talking about Notre Dame, because I was born in South Bend.
Yes. Okay. Let me step back and say, you look back to the Iran and Israel wars, right?
Yes.
They have the golden dome. That's our technology. And
Iron Dome. They call it the Iron Dome.
Iron Dome.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, thanks for correcting.
Trump calls it the Golden Dome because Trump loves gold.
Yes. Well, that's true. Yeah.
Yes.
So when they got into that fight, Iran would send 300 or 400 missiles, and the Iron Dome shot down most of them.
Yeah.
With like one or two that would get through. It's a very good technology. Trump wants that for North America.
Yes.
And he wants to intercept them as they come over the Arctic, not when they're getting close to the U.S. border.
Yes.
And so that means it envelops Canada.
Yes.
They should be, but they're kind of not cooperating with us on this.
Right.
Given the remarks that the Canadian Prime Minister made this week. So, but Trump is determined that he's going to put in place a golden dome, just like he was going to secure the border, just like he was going to shut down the narco trade.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that in his term, he's going to build the Golden Dome. And so he's laying the groundwork now for where it's going to get built.
Right, and he's laying the legal, the legality. This is not going to be a handshake agreement between the U.S. and Denmark, where Denmark says, well, you could do this for now.
Right.
This is going to be there will be a legal agreement in place.
Right.
Before this is, I think in the next month or so, that provides that Greenland is now an island or a country that the United States can protect, has the right to protect and do certain things to protect it, and that'll also include protecting Canada and protecting Europe,
NATO.
Yeah.
I think that was behind his claims that we had to own it, because we're going to be responsible for it anyway. And we can't build this.
We're not going to lease it. He said we're not going to fight over a lease.
Yes, meaning the United States not going to go to war over something that we've leased from somebody else. And I found it really interesting that a couple of years ago I read Denmark committed to spend $200 million to bulk up the defense.
Right.
They spent $2. You just look at the realities of their size and their economic resources. They cannot defend Greenland.
Right.
They can't come anywhere close to what the United States can do. So they ought to cooperate. And I think they're going to. NATO's going to cooperate, and maybe Denmark will. Mm-hmm. There's all these questions of sovereignty, but here we're back to a leader. Do you play by the rules and color in the boxes and allow yourself to be exposed to Chinese and Russian aggression there, or do you say, whatever the rules are, I'm going to change the rules. We've got to build our defense in that location.
Right. And so you have heads of state. I don't call them leaders. I call them heads of states who could be leaders, but they might not be. But you want a leader. You want people who are leaders. But you look at how the Europeans, the European heads of state are reacting to Trump, and then you ask, are you surprised? And my answer is no, I'm not surprised by how they're acting because they have a history of acting like this. This is part of the way, and I think it's partly because each one of those countries is sovereign. None of them are very big. None of them can act alone, and so, but the United States can.
Yes,
and so we're big enough and we're strong enough economically, militarily. We can do what we want to do, right. And these are people who are heads of states. They are as high up in their country as Trump is in his.
Yes. And
they don't like being told what's going to happen.
Right.
And whether they like it or not, so to speak. But the guy that is the head of NATO, his reaction to what Trump has said was fascinating to me because it contradicted 100% of the heads of states of Europe except the person who is the head of Italy. The lady who is the head of Italy was very clear that Greenland is a potential flashpoint, and that what Trump is saying about the risks of doing nothing are accurate and should be addressed. Now she's not full-throated for him like the head of NATO.
Yes,
but she's very clear that she doesn't stand with the other folks. I found that the head of state of Canada is particularly short-sighted.
Carney is his name.
Carney is his name, yes, and he's particularly short-sighted. He is not as he and Trump now do not get along.
Right.
As much as he tries to act like they're civil, but President Trump bounced the Prime Minister Carney off the Board of Peace. He had him included.
He had a replacement for the UN.
Yes, and
Carney made a speech that basically was supporting the prerogatives of the middle powers,
right?
Which is essentially a resistance. We're going to resist the domination of the big powers. In other words, we're not going to cooperate, with what the U.S. wants to do,
right?
And so Trump kicked him off.
Let
me check my perception on something else, and that is Trump went to Davos threatening tariffs on all of the European countries. Mm-hmm. He had not yet renounced force.
Right.
which he did at Davos, renounced the military invasion as a way of getting it.
I don't know that he renounced it. He said it's not necessary.
Okay.
I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, fair enough. There's a important subtlety there, so thank you. But what I perceive is that he found somebody that would listen to him and work with him in the head of NATO.
Yes.
And so he backed off the tariffs and backed off all of the other stuff because he's going to get some cooperation, he thinks.
Yes.
And I bet if that cooperation stops, it will go back to where it was. He will start stamping his feet and
yes, and I don't believe it's going to.
I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that's what he would do if there wasn't somebody there that says we're going to work with you on this.
Yes,
it's in their interest as well.
Yeah, Trump is not going to back off of his goal of having a secure America by having control of Greenland. And I use the word control as opposed to owning it. It may be in the form of owning it.
Yeah,
but in any event, it'll be control.
Well, in the event of a military confrontation, it'd be up to us anyway.
Exactly.
We'd have to pay the bill.
Exactly. And much damage would have been done in a military conflict. Much damage would have been done prior to us being able to defend it. And
the roots of this problem come from after World War II, where the United States has been paying a hugely disproportionate share for the defense of Western civilization. And I saw one article that said the amount of that extra contributions around the size of our national debt, $20 or $30 trillion or something like that.
Okay.
You can chalk it all up to our willingness to put ourselves in the position of being defender of all at our expense.
Yes. And Trump's not doing that.
No.
In fact, no future president will do that because our debt and deficit won't allow it.
Right.
So what's interesting here is that the only person who can speak for all of Europe is the head of NATO in his capacity.
You have the head of the EU, which I think thinks they can speak for all of the.
That's economic. The EU is an economic entity.
Yeah.
And it cannot. NATO is a military alliance.
Enough. One speaks in economics, one speaks in military.
Yes, but but the head of NATO is the person that Trump is dealing with. He has chosen to deal with somebody who has the authority, maybe not legal authority, but certainly the moral authority, and to be able to say, I'm speaking for the defense of Europe.
But I don't think he can compel the countries. I think
No,
he
can't.
Get them to go along.
Absolutely. And actually, the only one he has to compel to go along, frankly, at the end of the day, is Denmark, because Denmark is the one that ultimately will have to sign the agreement.
Right.
And so at any rate, I found the way Trump handled things in Davos is getting back to this question of leadership. But then I saw how the Europeans reacted with no good answer, by the way, to what President Trump said is a threat to both the United States and to Europe. None of them said it's not a threat.
Right, and none of them had another solution.
And offered a solution to solve that problem.
Right.
And that is why, but Europe has a history of handling matters exactly that way.
Right.
Which is why we had two world wars and many European wars before that.
Right.
I mean, dozens and dozens.
Right.
And so it's kind of in their DNA. But then Gavin Newsom showed up.
At
Davos, yeah, and he showed up, and I'm interested if you think that the way he handled himself, whether or not it showed that he has leadership in the good way, or whether he is instead of being considered a leader, he's a great opportunist and recognizes a way to take advantage of a situation, while at the same time lifting himself to accomplish a goal of winning a primary diminishes his ability to then act as a leader. So I'm wondering what you think of that.
Well,
or if it even matters.
I don't like the guy because I think his policies are horrible, but I have to say this, he's really good at getting attention in the same way that Donald Trump is good at getting attention.
Yep.
And he sometimes doesn't care whether it's good or bad. It places him in a position of identifying with the people that want that attention to be had.
Yes.
And let me say this a different way. I heard it said that politicians are better off not saying, I support your policy, but I am with you.
Yes.
I'm one of you. I identify with you. I'm with you. And I think that's behind Trump's 30% that'll support him no matter what he says. I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and they would still support me. He made a joke about that.
Right.
Well, his opponents took it literally and just, but we've long had yellow dog Democrats who were known they would vote for a yellow dog if it had the D by their name in the election. That's kind of a Southern idea, I think, because they mostly were in the South.
It's the yellow dog Democrats today. There are still people who will vote Democrat, period, but they generally now have an economic interest in doing so as opposed to a cultural reason.
Well, because the government unions.
The lobbyists. In other words, if of the 10 wealthiest counties in the country, 7 of them touch Washington, D.C.
Right.
And then Washington, D.C. itself is incredibly wealthy.
So whatever the cause, there are reasons that some people will just vote one party or the other without looking at any further detail.
Correct. And California is so Democrat run for those very reasons.
Right.
And so Newsom, I think what you said is correct. And so
thank God.
Yes, about his getting attention, because I have maintained, because people when Trump ran for office the first time, I made the mistake of thinking he had a ceiling of about 30% of the Republican vote.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And that wasn't because of anything other than I just didn't think that. I thought that as people dropped out, the Republicans would gravitate toward somebody who had experience in politics. They would go with Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz or John Kasich or somebody. But it didn't. Every time they dropped out, 60% of the support went straight to Trump.
Well, the way I heard this described is they thought he would fight for them. No matter how crude he was fighting for them.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Al Gore would say that when he's running. Every day is a fight for you.
Yeah, and that all, but almost all politicians say that.
Yeah.
But in Trump's case, a lot of people believed it who actually were not even politically interested.
Right.
But became politically interested because Trump connected with them. But then Trump ran the second time. And when he ran I'm talking about when he ran and won the second time, was inaugurated the second time.
In 24.
Yeah, in 24. When he ran in that election, he was extremely clear on the things that he was going to do.
He had 4 years to think about it.
Yes, but he had 4 years to think about it, but he was very clear. And the number one issue in that election was immigration. And within a period of about 90 days, illegal immigration ceased to grow, ceased to become a. He solved that issue. He sealed.
Ceased to be a problem.
He sealed the southern border in like 90 days.
Yeah.
Now, then we still had a whole lot of illegal immigrants, many of them violent, who are here, and that's an ongoing problem that Trump is trying to solve. But what's interesting is that while it was the number one issue in the campaign, it is now ranked number 4. In terms of concern of voters. So
this is 1 year later.
Only 1 year later.
A little bit over a year
later.
later.
The second biggest issue in the last election was crime. And now that's like 7th or 8th list. I mean, it's not even, it doesn't hardly even matter because, once again, the voters perceive that issue to have been resolved,
right.
At least to their satisfaction. And so now the big issue is affordability. Meaning inflation, standard of living, these types of things.
Right.
And so that'll be what the focus is of the next election, which gets me back to the question of when you talk about political leadership, what Trump did. Now, whether or not his policies will be effective, we'll see in the next 2 or 3 quarters. But he promised to cut taxes on tips, cut taxes on overtime, and cut taxes on Social Security.
Those are now enacted into law.
Those are now enacted into law. He promised to extend the 2017 tax reform bill, and that's now been, and not extend it, make it permanent. That's now been enacted into law.
Which was to prevent rates from going up.
Yes. Yeah, that didn't make rates go down at all, but it did keep them from going up because they were set to expire at the end of 2025.
Cuts were set to expire, and they were going to go back to a prior higher level.
Yeah, yes, for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, across the board.
Right.
And then he also put in some things in the Big Beautiful Bill, because I'm calling it the Big Beautiful Bill because that is its name.
That's what he called it.
That is what its name is.
Of it, yeah.
That is the formal name. But he also added acceleration of depreciation of capital goods. And I don't remember, Mike, whether or not he ran on that or not, but he did run on increasing manufacturing jobs in the U.S. and enacting policies to do that.
So basically, it's a tax cut for people that invest in equipment because they can write off the expenses more quickly.
Sooner rather than later. Yeah. So I don't know if I would call it a tax cut.
Well, it reduces in fewer
it's
taxes.
It's a cash flow.
paid.
It's a cash flow issue.
Yeah.
It accelerates. Yeah. It accelerates. It diminishes the amount you have to pay in taxes in the short term.
Yes.
But
it
it
moves it from far out to closer in.
Exactly.
So you pay less
cuts
this year.
You pay less this year and more later.
Yeah.
Then only making up the difference. And so the capital goods industries in this country are doing well. But I think that most of that will hit in 27 and 28. And by the way, that particular aspect of the Big Beautiful Bill ends at the end of 2028. But the point I'm trying to make is that even people who cannot stand Trump, when you go down the list of things that he promised to do, they acknowledge that he did them,
right?
That he kept his promises.
Right.
So this gets back to my question of political leadership. Is political leadership tricking people into thinking that you're with them to get their vote and then doing what you want to? Or is political leadership telling the voters what you're going to do and then doing everything you can while in office to keep the promises?
Well, in my opinion, the question answers itself if you structure it that way. But I would like to observe that the alternative that you described is pretty much what Joe Biden did.
Yes.
He said he was going to run as a caretaker president. Mm-hmm. He was going to get rid of the chaos. Everything's so chaotic under Trump's rule.
Right.
He's going to restore normalcy.
And unity.
And it turns out he tried to become the next FDR. Mm-hmm. Whether that was him or his staff, with his cognition problems that came on later, raises questions about who's really the horsepower behind mm-hmm. what he did and things that he tried to do and that were even worse.
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
But there are people that say one thing and then do in order to get elected. You have it right now in Virginia. The lady talked about having been a CIA agent, and she stands for law enforcement. And the first thing she did was to try to override the standard in the law now for DEI.
Yes. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of things. And this is your point is right on the question here, and that is that you had a politician in Virginia who ran as a moderate and who has been inaugurated for maybe a month, and her appointments are extremely far left, and her policies. She has put forth a tax bill that will dramatically raise marginal tax rates to where Virginia will be then among the 7 or 8 highest taxed states in the country. And she can do this because for the first time in a long time, the Democrats control the governorship and both houses of the legislature in Virginia. Now, I want to talk a little bit, staying on this theme of leadership and moving away from national politics, I want to talk about New York because Manadani was very, very clear when he ran on what he intended, what he would do if elected. And the biggest things that he said was he would freeze rent and then ultimately lower the cost of living in housing in New York. He said he would make the buses free, and he said he would he would have free childcare, and that he would accomplish that by taxing the rich and taxing, and those are people over $1 million. Yes. That's that definition. And taxing corporations.
Annual income over $1 million?
Annual income over $1 million. And then increasing taxes on corporations. Now, Kathy Hochul, in her State of the State address,
New York governor, has said that she supports the things that the programs that Manadani has proposed, but she will not support increasing taxes. So I find that to be kind of humorous because you can't
you can't spend money that you don't have
In the states,
in
in
the
the
states.
federal
You
government.
can at the federal level. Exactly, exactly. So this is here. But here's something that's interesting: the comptroller of the state of New York, and maybe the city of New York, but anyway, it's a guy named Mark Levine. Mark Levine has come out and said that the budget deficit for the current fiscal year of New York. Now, Manadani has ascended to the mayorship right in the middle of the year. But they're saying that the deficit will be $2 billion, actually $2.2 billion will be the deficit this year. And next year...
In New York City?
In New York City, just the city. And then, but next year, the comptroller says, if nothing changes, no new programs, nothing, the deficit will be $10.4 billion. So that's how far kind of out of whack things were on a spending side when Manadani took office. Manadani's people have said that they agree with those forecasts, and the solution is to raise taxes higher and more quickly. That's their solution.
Right.
Now, that, of course, assumes that all the people, or the few people, relatively few people who are going to be paying much, much higher taxes are going to sit still.
Well, the taxes are very progressive, and the richest people pay a very heavy percentage of that.
1% pay 40% of the taxes in New York City.
So it only takes a few of them to leave,
yes,
which some have already done, to bust that plan.
Yeah, and so and so Hochul, I'm reading from this article from Bloomberg. Hochul, who is seeking re-election in November, has helped advance parts of Manadani's agenda, such as expanding childcare, but she pledges not to raise taxes, and she said that during her State of the Union, because she's also running for re-election. Then in Manadani, in a statement, Manadani echoed the criticism and reiterated his call to raise levies on the most well-heeled, Bloomberg's words. And the quote is, based on our administration's assessment so far, the gaps for the fiscal year 2026 and 27 are in line with the city and the state comptroller's findings. As I said on Tuesday, we believe raising taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers and corporations will be necessary. So he sees Manadani, and by the way, I would call this an act of leadership. I think it's really bad policy, and I don't think it will achieve the goal.
Yeah.
But I do think political leaders should do what they promise when they are running, because that's what got them elected. And our elections are to determine the future of our city, state, or country until the next election.
Years ago, I read a biography of James K. Polk, who is kind of an obscure president. Most people don't know much about him, but because he's from the southern part of Middle Tennessee here, we may know him a little bit better.
Yep.
What I learned, even though I was pretty ignorant about anything about him, I think I'd been to his house down there. But he was, I think acolyte is the right word, of Andrew Jackson.
Okay.
And one of Andrew Jackson's last political acts was to get Polk elected.
Oh.
Okay, so he was a follow-on, like the next generation. It's like Trump may try to get Vance elected or something to keep his policies going.
Right.
But anyway, there was this close relationship, and Jackson had been this very influential guy, the first non-Virginian, non-Bostonian. He represented kind of the West, the people, all of that.
Yeah. So
Polk ran on, he had three things. He said, maybe it's four. I just looked this up. I remembered three from the book. But ChatGPT told me it was four. One is to settle the Oregon boundary dispute, which they did settle, I think, at the 48th parallel.
And who was that dispute with?
Britain.
Britain, okay.
Yeah, because where is the division between Vancouver and the Oregon territories, I think before the establishment of Washington State, if I remember vaguely. But anyway, the border between the U.S. and Canada, Canada was part of Britain.
Right.
That was one, and they did that. Number two, acquire California and New Mexico. He did that.
Yep.
Okay. Number three, reestablish an independent treasury system. And number four, reduce the tariff. And they passed the tariff of 1846. He did that. He was there one term, and he retired.
And he did the four things he wanted. And then he didn't live very much longer, but he had four things he wanted to accomplish. He was very clear as a candidate.
Yeah.
And he did them and left. And it's interesting when you see historians rank the effectiveness of presidents, he's in the top 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to this question of what is leadership.
Yeah, I want to come back to this on one particular aspect of that, but I wanted to mention also we had a governor here in Tennessee, Lamar Alexander, that did this exact thing. He said, I'm going to do 3 things. And he made a point that you can't do everything.
Right.
Now, Trump's got a lot of stuff he's doing. It's more than 3.
Yes.
But it focuses the mind to say, I'm going to do these particular things. And Lamar Alexander was elected, I think, part because of that focus and clarity.
Yeah.
But back to Polk, one of the things he did was he bought New Mexico and California. Think about the other times that this has happened in American history. Jefferson bought the Louisiana Purchase. That's everything west of the Mississippi, I think, out to about the Rocky Mountains.
Yep.
All what we now call the Midwest.
Yes.
Down through Texas. Lincoln bought Alaska. It's called Seward's Folly. Seward was his Secretary of State. People thought it was a waste of money.
Right.
But that was a huge territorial expansion. Then I think we somehow acquired Hawaii. And I think that was probably to have a forward base militarily way out in the Pacific Ocean. We didn't need it for other reasons.
And then we turned it into a state.
Yes.
So it was a protectorate, for lack of a better term, kind of like Guam is, I guess, today.
Yeah.
And but then we made it a state.
Yes.
And
and those changed the shape of the nation. They're territorial. And I think Trump has this in mind. He wants to be great. I think one of his objectives is to be recognized as a transformative, great president. And some people don't like that. I acknowledge it. I think you can just see that in the things that he says.
Yes.
But it drives him to do things that I think they're in the national interest, to secure the border, to improve the economy, to protect the culture, is something he said at Davos.
Yep.
Which got some people really picked that out. This is critical. We've got to protect our culture because it's what has produced the Western standard of living that leads the world. And if we don't protect it, we're going to lose it.
Right.
But acquiring or controlling or somehow integrating Greenland into the U.S. national interest is a big, big deal.
Yes, it is, and it's a much bigger deal than I understood it to be until Trump brought it up. When he brought it up the first time, I thought he was bringing it up to deflect from something else. I didn't know what something else was. I just thought he was deflecting.
Yeah.
And then the more and more I watched the arguments and listened to the arguments, and then looked at an actual map, because most people think it's kind of interesting that if you fly from Chicago to Japan, that you do it by flying over California, and you don't.
No,
you fly over the top of the world.
That's right.
And so that airspace is different than what most people think, and
right.
Trump recognizes that.
I've read, by the way, that I think the Russians or the Chinese or both have been increasing their naval activity in the Bering Strait, which is at 50 miles between Alaska and Asia. Yeah. Because it is a choke point for getting into the Arctic.
Yeah.
So they see that this is will become a strategic flashpoint.
Yeah, and this is where, to me, if you look at the history of certainly of Europe and maybe beyond, but certainly in Europe, they have a history of not seeing the future very well, which ends up resulting in catastrophic outcomes. What Trump is trying to say is, I'm not going to wait until it is a flashpoint and we're in a war.
Right.
I'm going to. It's kind of like Margaret Thatcher said. The best way to avoid war is to make sure that the person who may want to start a war recognizes they will lose more than they could possibly gain.
Yeah,
that's a pretty straightforward argument.
It's very straightforward. Yeah. I'm also reminded of the idea that you fix the roof before the storm.
There you go. Margaret Thatcher.
She probably said that too.
She probably said.
But let's talk a little bit about what Trump's priorities are, what his objectives are. We've mentioned a couple. Okay, now one of them is the economy. One of them is the border. I want to broaden from the border to the idea of the nation. He's very nationalistic. Make America great again is a national, and people who don't like populism, who think it's patriotic jingoism, hate it. Okay, they think the United States, the Americans have brought a lot of evil into the world, and so they don't like this enshrining the nation. I just finished a fascinating book by an author who says that he thinks the nation state is the right entity to have sovereignty in the world. because before you had nation states, you had tribes, basically, and they families aggregated into tribes, and tribes aggregated into other groups, and you can see how nation states may emerge from this kind of bottom up sort of thing. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have people that want world government. Even some people we like Locke and Kant said, how do you resolve this international conflict? You make a supreme body that harmonizes everything. Our side of the political spectrum is very skeptical of that because it's an invitation to tyranny. But there's a lot of people who believe that, and he explains the resistance, the hatred, the vituperation for nationalism to people who want this international order, and they call it the rules-based order. That's what Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, said. We're seeing the collapse of the rules-based order, which might be read as code for internationalism, globalism, sovereignty at a level beyond the nation.
Right.
So this author is making, I think, a very compelling argument that the nation is the right place to have sovereignty. International is too big.
Well, I think he's also. I'm guessing. I've not read the book, but I'm guessing he also believes that freedom is at the individual level is a good thing.
Yes.
Up to a point.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
I'm not free to harm you.
Right.
But I'm free to do what I want to do if it doesn't harm you.
Right.
And I may have to bear consequences for making bad choices.
Sure.
Okay. But the nation state is more likely to provide for freedom than a globalistic form of government.
Yes.
And I can't imagine. I truly cannot even imagine how a global form of government could coexist with individual rights. I just don't see it because
it's too distant.
The rules to make them global would have to be so profound, and then they would have to be enforced by force.
I just distrust universalism in every form.
Well, but it's
basically a function of empire to say everything is going to be under my rules.
Right.
Chinese have tried to do it. The
Right.
Europeans tried to do it.
People say
and
no
all kinds
kings.
of empires.
People say no kings. That's one king.
Yeah.
But I want to go back here to some of these other political issues because Manadani, I did a little search, and in New York City actually has the right to raise income taxes on the inhabitants of New York City. I did not think that was true, but I asked the question: can New York City raise income taxes on its residents? And the answer is yes. New York City can raise income taxes on its residents, and recent proposals suggest increasing the city tax. It can do it by the city council passing it and the mayor signing it. So Hochul does not have to approve corporate taxes. A city tax on the residences.
Okay.
On the corporations, the state has to be involved.
Okay.
So if Manadani wants to tax millionaires to solve his problem, he can. He can do that.
Try to pin the tail on the donkey. I think the donkey may be running.
Yeah. Now, along this, I'm trying to I've got 3 or 4 cities here because I think they're good data points. Because you have Trump on one side who is doing one thing, and then you have the Democrat Party in certain places where it now has the power to do what it wants to do. It's taking a very different road. And in Chicago, the city of Chicago, this is also from Bloomberg, the city is dividing up its annual advance supplemental payment to its underfunded pensions into two separate advances. And the reason given is we don't have the cash right now to do what we're supposed to do, so we're going to divide it into we're going to pay half now, and then we're going to pay half at mid-year. But if they're going to wait and pay half at mid-year, when they get to mid-year, they're not going to have the money to pay that half.
Right.
So all they're doing is kicking the can down the road 6 months. And Chicago is a city that has been run exclusively by Democrats for many, many decades.
Yeah.
And so if we're
they've
looking,
kicked the can down the road, and their pensions are insolvent.
They're insolvent, and so the city that's a data point and something to watch because there aren't any Democrats who are providing an alternative in Chicago to kicking the can down the road, and there's no Republicans who even who can say anything because
they're not in office.
They're just they have no power, and they don't. I mean, I'm not sure they have a voice other than perhaps a talk radio station in New York. I don't even know if that's true, but that'd be the only place where people who are saying we cannot tax ourselves out of this problem. This is a true spending problem. But the problem is that the people who are receiving all the largesse from the excessive spending reinvest that money to elect politicians that will keep the gravy train going.
Right.
And so the only choice that the taxpayers have is to leave.
Yes.
And they're doing that in some numbers. In Chicago, some are leaving by just going to another county, and some are leaving the entire state.
So the question for me is, who gets left holding the bag when this all busts? When they can't pay those pensions, I think it's very predictable they'll go to the federal government and want a bailout. Well, New York did when they didn't get it, and they didn't get it. And I think there's a lot of people on the left that will cry very hard that the federal government has to bail this out.
Well, they certainly will because they support that. But Detroit had this problem, and the city of Detroit actually declared. I think Detroit is probably the largest city to declare bankruptcy. Yeah. And when it declared bankruptcy, it was able to wipe out its pensions. 2/3 of taxes in Detroit, 2/3 at the time it declared bankruptcy, were going to pay current pensions. So the city only had, and the taxes were already very high, and the city only had 1/3 of the revenue to operate.
So in that case, the people that got left holding the bag are the pensioners who were promised money they didn't get.
That's correct. Yeah. That's exactly right. And because cities and states can't coin money, they can borrow,
right?
But they can, and by the way, the bondholders also got hosed in the bankruptcy of Detroit.
Meaning they didn't get their money.
They didn't get their money. They got pennies on the dollar. Yeah. Pennies on the dollar. Now, another data point city is Portland. And I'm just bringing this up, and I want to continue to bring this up in our podcast because these are examples of cities, and these are not small places.
Yeah. Of cities
where the population is voting in politicians who are effectively destroying their city. And in Portland, this article from the Wall Street Journal, it says New York City isn't the only place where socialism is on the rise. In November, Oregon's largest city formed a new city council and elected 4 members of the Democrat Socialists of America. They dominate the 12-person council with the help of 2 other members, and they are driving the city into higher spending and more taxes. And I was in Portland about a year ago, and the downtown area of Portland is decaying before our eyes. Mm-hmm. The largest, most valuable office building about 15 years ago, and I may have my years off slightly, but I don't have the numbers off, sold for $350 million. It was put back on the market within the last year for $80 million, and they can't sell it. And the reason is that half of the building, the tenants are leaving the building because working downtown is simply not a safe place to work.
Right.
Half that building is now occupied by vagrants, homeless people.
Yeah.
But they're occupying the building. The landlord turns to the government and asks the government to remove the vagrants because the landlord can't, and the city by law, and the city won't. In other words, they don't have the authority, but the city does have the authority, but chooses not to use it.
And nobody's going to rent in a building that's filled with vagrants.
No, and they're going to flee, and then they're going to also what they're doing is they're also leaving and not paying the rent because they're saying you're not providing me a safe place for my employees.
You've broken the lease yourself.
You've broken the lease.
Yeah.
And so these are just kind of little data points. And then I pulled up something else. In Oregon, in 2024, almost 300,000 workers in Oregon were members of unions. Most of it was government employee unions. And they pay an average of $1,000 a year in dues. And so that is $300 million a year that the people in Oregon, that the unions are collecting. And then they turn around. I did some additional searching to see, who is receiving the money from the unions. And the unions dominate the political giving in the state of Oregon.
Well, this is just graft.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you use money to get elected, and then you use your office to give yourself money, or your supporters money, or your sycophants money.
Yeah. But then you also support not just. I mean, it's not just the graft back. And we're going to see in Minnesota how extensive the fraud on all of these programs where the federal government spends most of the money. Yeah. We're going to see how deep and how high up in the administration the knowledge of the fraud went.
Well, I'm reading that California is the king of this.
Yes,
and
we've
talked about this before.
Yeah, and what we did was, Mike, we can encourage our listeners, they can go do this themselves to just try to find in broad strokes. I don't remember what bank robber it was years ago said, "Why do you rob banks?" And he said, "Well, that's where the money is." And so
someone asked him, Willie Sutton, I think
Willie
was his
Sutton.
name.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Where the money is.
That's where the money is. And so what I did was I said, what's the population of California?
Right.
The answer was 34 million. So how much money does California spend on Medicaid? And the answer is 130 million. So I divided the population into billion, 130 billion.
Yeah.
And it's $3,900 per person.
Per citizen, not per recipient.
Not per
citizen
recipient.
of the
That's
state.
per citizen. 3,900. So that's a really broad brush way to look. You can dig deeper.
Yeah.
But Tennessee, for example, we asked for our Medicaid to be block granted about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
We received $7.9 billion. Our population is 7.7. So we spend a little over $1,000. California spends almost $4,000 per so the amount of money that's being spent on Medicaid. By the way, the cost of a doctor, average income of a doctor in Tennessee and California are within 5% of each other. So it's not because healthcare is so much more expensive.
Yeah.
It's that there's so much being paid for that isn't being performed at all.
Yeah.
And because it's good for the economics of the state.
Right.
And so
and because they're getting federal money to pay for most of that.
Yes, they only contribute a little bit, and the federal government contributes
this is
3 or 4.
Happening very heavily in large blue cities.
Yes.
Let's just say it that way.
Yes.
New York, Chicago, Portland, Los Angeles.
Well, or blue states, and it have to be blue cities in blue states.
Okay.
So, for example, Nashville is a pretty blue city. Okay?
Yes,
The
yes,
city
it is.
itself.
Yes.
Blue city. No fraud in Nashville.
Right.
Because the state pays the money.
Right.
And for these things, and the comptroller in Tennessee is similar to the treasurer in other states.
Yes.
And a few years ago, some fraudsters tried to set up ways to defraud Medicaid in Tennessee, but because we are block granted, there's zero incentive for us to engage in that. And we caught them, we indicted them, we prosecuted them, and that sent a message to any other would-be fraudsters. If you do it, we will catch you and we'll put you in jail. We think what you're doing is bad.
Right.
In Minnesota, the public officials up there clearly think that what was being done was good because they're defending them. They're doing everything they can to keep that from being found. And so I'm going to make a prediction here.
Okay.
I'm going to make a prediction that the federal government will apply the RICO statutes in Minnesota. So let me talk a little bit about what that means for the audience. RICO is racketeering. It's the racketeering something or other for corrupt organizations. But it was designed, Mike, to organize crime.
Yes.
And the way RICO works is that if 100 people are indicted and they are on trial together, if one of those people is found guilty, all of those people are found guilty.
Yeah, so I think the concept was the law didn't adequately cover individual participation in a greater scheme that altogether formed a corrupt act.
Correct.
And so I looked up the name here, racketeer influenced, with a D on it, racketeer influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act.
Okay.
So it was intended to get at collectives, at systems of corruption.
But it was
aimed at the mafia.
Aimed at organized, let's call it organized crime.
Yes.
Well, it didn't mean it could only be used in the quote private
definitions
sector.
are now finding their application in new places.
Yes, and in fact, the Democrats tried to apply the RICO statute to some aspect of Trump. I don't remember what it was, but it was definitely the RICO statutes that they were trying to use. Well, in this case, so if RICO is used and they indict, say, 200 people, including the people who actually processed the licenses,
right?
Those people can say, "I will tell you all you want if you'll take me out of the indictment."
Right.
So it is a way, and that's what RICO was designed to do, was to let the low level organized crime people to turn state's evidence,
right,
so that they could get the big guys.
Yeah.
And so I predict that will happen in Minnesota. And in fact, if it doesn't happen, I will be very disappointed, because there's no question, when you just look at it, look at all of the evidence, not proof, but all of the evidence, it is virtually impossible for me to believe that the high ups in the Minnesota government, both Minneapolis and the state, were not aware of this vast fraudulent network. And that's what it was.
So we began by talking about leadership. I'd like to go back to what are the key aspects of Trump's leadership.
Okay.
We've touched on a few of those things. One
Yeah.
is nationalism, right, to make America great again, and that involves things like border and Venezuela, Greenland, national security around those issues. The economy we've talked about, privatizing things. One that's kind of implied by what we've been talking about is devolving the federal government to get rid of the graft and corruption that is in place at the federal level and at the state level. We started early in Trump's administration with the Elon Musk. What was the council that they put? Doge. So they were going after corruption at the federal level and found plenty of it, right? I think the savings are just kind of now starting, as I understand it. There was a couple of billion they were going to give to Stacey, what's her name, in Georgia?
Stacey, $2 billion to an organization that had been given $100 the year before.
Yeah. This is just absolute corruption. And so I think, we called it the deep state before he was elected. I think he's still after, gutting the deep state.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
Do you agree with those three things?
Yes.
Then maybe there are more, but
yes,
I think those are the big ones.
And that's what he wants. That's what he wants to do. The question is, how do you address the corruption at the state level that exists because of federal funding? And
they could use the RICO Act.
Well, the RICO is one.
Yeah,
RICO is certainly one, but that also requires that you have an administration that actually wants to catch the crime.
Yeah,
I would say that the other way to do it, to the extent that the federal government is going to be involved in the payment of things like Medicaid, that the money be block granted to each state based on their population, and that they're told, this is the amount of money the federal government is going to help you take care of your low-income people.
Right.
How you spend it is up to you.
So there's legal approaches with the lawsuits. There's administrative approaches with giving the money differently. There are political approaches with just exposing this stuff.
Yeah.
Presumably somebody is horrified and interested, and that may be not the case, because there's a lot of beneficiaries here that are going to resist changing it.
I think the Minnesota elections this year will give us an indication whether or not voters who
want this for their state,
who are unaware of the fraud because they weren't engaged in it, will be outraged enough to change the leadership of the state. Right. That'll be interesting to see.
Well, Wallace is not running again, so what does it mean to change leadership? Does it?
Whoever's the Democrat will still keep the.
Well, this is my point. Do you have somebody else come in that's Walls light, or do you change? There's not much history of Republican governance in Minnesota.
Yes, there's some.
Is there?
Yeah.
Well, I know Wisconsin flips back and forth, but Minnesota, I thought, has always been pretty blue.
It's been bluer more recently, but there was I'm blanking on his name, but maybe 12 years ago This is not like it's not like California, which is deep, deep blue, or New York, which is deep, deep blue, where New York hasn't had a Republican governor for maybe 20 years, and even when it did, it always had a Democrat legislature.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem is that a Republican governor can only accomplish so much. But a Republican governor in the case of Minnesota could certainly uncover and work with the federal government to uncover the fraud.
Right.
So that would be a big thing. And since Minnesota is not a particularly big state, it's not even the population. It's not even as big as Tennessee.
Yeah.
So that it's now a well-known issue.
Right.
You can't be a citizen of Minnesota who has and who works and earns a living and not be very aware of now what's been going on, even though you might not have been before.
Right.
Well, Michael, we've kind of talked about leadership today, and we may have, and I'm really not. I'm focused on Trump, European leaders, and Gavin Newsom, only because Gavin Newsom is trying to become the heir apparent. I don't think he will become the heir apparent to the Democrat nomination without a very strong primary challenge. I'm guessing there'll be at least 10 Democrats who are well known who announce and run for president, and so I don't think that Gavin will have the lead that scares the other people who want to be president.
Well, he's certainly getting the lion's share of the attention now, and I think that's intentionally his strategy.
That's what he's doing because he won't be governor after this year. He will then be able to announce I'm running, but he won't be governor. And if you're not the governor, there's a lot of infrastructure that you then don't have. Right. When you're the governor, you do. Okay. So, Michael, I appreciate it today, and we wandered around a little bit, but I wanted to try to keep it on when we as voters, as citizens, when we think about political leadership, what is it that we should want? That what we should want as voters and citizens, what should we want in our political leaders, both as candidates and then as people who are in positions to govern? And you have the executive branch of the presidency of a state or a city. What do you want those political leaders to do? And then you have the legislative branches, the House, the Senate, and then in most states, the House and the Senate, and then at the city level, the council. Yeah. So that's how we're organized, yeah. and I can't think of a better way. It doesn't always work great, but what do we want political leaders at each of those levels? What do we want them to do as candidates? How do we want them to run? Do they?
Yeah. A lot of times the answer is I want somebody that looks like me.
Well,
and thinks like me. That's maybe not the best guide. Sometimes it is I want somebody I like.
Yeah.
Whose character I believe in. Jimmy Carter ran that way. We're a nation as good as its people, or a government that's as good as its people.
Well, they all do that.
That was a moral argument.
Yeah, they all do that. And so do we want candidates who run, as you said, when Biden ran, he ran on unity and getting rid of all of this hostility.
Right.
You vote for me and I'm a caretaker. I will solve that. I will be a president for all the people.
Back to normalcy.
Back to normalcy. Yeah, but not saying anything that he would do.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to get at here is how specific should we want, not do we want, how specific should we want in order for the country to move in the right direction. And when I say right, I mean meaning, as I said earlier, greatest amount of prosperity for the largest number of people possible ought to be what government should be striving for.
That's what we think, and people have different ways of coming to it. That's why we have elections. Yeah. There's certainly different opinions about which way we should be going, but I think that's the right question to ask.
Okay. Well, good. Well, Mike, thanks so much, and I'll see you next week.
Good.